Welcome to the Seller Roundtable e-commerce coaching and business strategies with Andy Arnott and Amy Wees.
My first kind of big success, or what I would consider my big success, was in, I think it was around 2010, right around there, 2009, 2010. Android was a new phone, new operating system. My brother-in-law, Jared, had come home with it was like a flip up. You would like slide the screen up and it had a keyboard under. I think it was called like the Danger Pad or something like that. I can't remember. Or no, G1. I think it was called the G1, the Google One. And I played with it and I was like, wow, this is really cool. This is better than the iPhone. Even back then I could see the writing on the wall just because it had like a trackpad or a trackball and like some interesting features. But I just kind of liked the way that it was very customizable, extensible, things like that. So then I started researching and found out that building apps for it wasn't that hard. I had, through the years of doing all these other things, I had kind of taught myself a little bit of programming, nothing super high level, but, enough to do some coding, to understand, how languages are put together, kind of, all that kind of stuff. So I was like, you know what, I'm gonna spin up some apps. I spun up like a solitaire app and a few other apps, and they just took off, like over 1 million downloads. And that business I kept adding more and more apps to it. So by the time we were in full swing, it was like we had like around 30 apps on the Android place. Back then it was like Android Store, I think they called it. And we were bringing in some serious money, and not only that, but it was like an app business. So it's, I would have to check in on it and nurture it like once a week. But besides that, it was like on autopilot. Being so early, such an early mover to that market, it was amazing. To this day, it's still the easiest money I've ever made. Don't get me wrong, I worked really hard, but once it got going, it like snowballed. Now, that came to a crashing halt, unfortunately, because if people remember this, very few do. When I mention this, it's funny. Back then, Google had a product called Buzz, which they had created. It was a social network that they were trying to compete with Twitter on. And I had built a web wrapper. If you're a geek, you know what that is. If you're not, it's literally a program that would look like an icon. When you pushed it, it would bring up a web page in the mobile format. Back then, Android was so early on, like they hadn't even created an app for that product. So I was like, I'll just create my own web wrapper because I used the product. I wanted to launch it from my home screen, like easy peasy. So that ended up being one of the early apps in my account. Well, fast forward 2 years later, whatever it was, Google somehow, deployed an AI or had people reviewing accounts and found our account, and the app was called like Buzz It or something like that. And so then they nailed me with a trademark infraction and shut the entire account down. So we went from
so their trademark was Buzz, and
right,
then
Google Buzz.
You named your early web wrapper that you created before you created all these other apps, and you kind of forgot about it. You named it Buzz It, and then they were like, "Oh, you're infringing on our trademark. You're out of here." Like they canceled your account.
They zapped our entire account. Yeah, banned us from the store. And so we went from an insane amount of money to zero in one day, like overnight, like worse than an Amazon suspension, because with Google back then, there wasn't really a process or a way to they had appeals, but it was like, no, you're gone. Like there was no really discussion. So that was pretty devastating. That being said, I learned a lot along the way on, with that process or with that happening. And when that happened, that's when we were getting close to having our first son. My wife, Molly, wanted to quit her job and stay home and raise our son. So, I started looking at other avenues. And that's when I came into finding out about Amazon. And honestly, I can't remember how I was introduced to it. I think I might have read like an online article about it or something and was just like, I'll give it a try. And that's where I ended up. And that was in, I think, end of 2012, beginning of 2013, I think is when we started our Amazon business.
Thanks for tuning in. Join us every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for live Q&A and bonus content after the recording at SellerRoundtable.com. Sponsored by the ultimate software tool for Amazon sales and growth, SellerSEO.com and AmazingAtHome.com.